Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the Runway WWDC reaction stream and discussion of how the announcements will actually affect mobile developers in particular. That's a great name for this stream that I came up with as we started talking. We'll have something certainly much more concise and to the point to actually title this on our site. So let's do some introductions. And let's talk about how we came to love Apple, what brought us here, our first Apple products. The history of my life is not one of loving Apple. My name is Richard, by the way, just so you know. Everyone will say their name as we go around. But my history is not one of loving Apple. I had a PC in high school that I played Doom on. This is in the late 90s. And then I just had PC at home, and then I got a job at my first startup job in San Francisco. And I wanted a PC, but they refused to give me one, which is not uncommon at startups in San Francisco. And this was around 2006. And they gave me a Mac Mini. And within a day, I was like, "Oh my God, I have got to switch to Apple everywhere." The one of the biggest key things for me, if anyone remembers, in older versions of Windows, when you would do a search to try to find something on your computer, a little dog would appear and would look around while
Oh
your
yeah.
search ran, and it would find nothing that you were searching for. And then, but even in 2006, when you were on your Mac and you typed in a search, whatever you searched for would just appear on your screen immediately. And that blew me away, as well as almost everything else that I could do on on the Mac. Now I would like to turn it over to the rest of the people here. We have Matt, Ale, and Adrian, and virtual Adrian here. So Matt, why don't you kick us off?
Sure. I was raised on IBM ThinkPads and things like that. I remember kind of being aware of the Mac world, and I had a few friends who had them at home. And I would check them out once in a while, but I wasn't like, super compelled by them. And then it was when Mac OS 10 and the Aqua interface came out. I was like, okay, this is something different than anything that I was used to. And it was like, I think the first little hint that interfaces can look beautiful and be delightful as opposed to just completely utilitarian, um, things like that. So, I mean, my first step there was actually trying to make my Windows desktop look like Aqua and things like that. And then it was so actually a really long time until I had an Apple product. And my first one, which I didn't really realize until, yeah, Richard, you had me look this up for this very session, was an iPod Photo released in 2004, just because it had that color screen and it had like a really small version of the beautiful like Aqua-esque interface, and I loved it. And I had everything back then. I had like a Zune, I had a whatever the Nomad, Creative Nomad, one of the first MP3 players, just because I had like a really like 10,000 library strong curated MP3 collection. But I was really particular about getting the album art perfectly every time. And the iPod Photo was like the best way in the palm of your hand to like showcase your album art as you're listening to things. So I love that device. And then like really my like full entrance into the ecosystem was the iPhone 4 with the Retina display. And that was when I really had to get in there because the screen was like basically nothing else that you were able to buy. And that's what actually got me like formally into interface design because I designed an app for the company I was working for at the time.
Fantastic. Two more things before we pass it to Ale. Uh, what do you do here at Runway?
I mean, I think somewhere on paper it says CXO, but I lead product design here, product strategy. I help out with, I own the Runway marketing site. I am usually in Brooklyn, New York. I'm recording this from Massachusetts.
Okay, so Ale, tell us about how you came to love Apple.
Yeah, for me, it's a story that probably a little similar to yours, Richard, that in the sense that I started with other brands. So Commodore 64, for example, going way back, and then Windows PCs. And then I had kind of an iPhone 3G. It was my first Apple device, mostly by proxy, because my dad wanted a GPS for sailing, and he didn't want to splurge on a dedicated device. So I thought the iPhone 3G would give him that feature. He never actually used that, so I don't know how that would have worked out. But after that, it was the iPhone 4S where I really started kicking things off. And also, I had a neighbor that I never had a Mac before. And I had a neighbor that needed to upgrade his hard drive to an SSD, and he knew I was kind of a geek and stuff. So he said, "Hey, please, would you upgrade the computer for me?" So I had the Mac for a few days at my house, and I fell in love with it. In 2012, I got a MacBook Retina, and yeah, and for me, it's been 6.5 years of doing iOS app development, and then joining Runway, where I've been working on the back end. So I tie a little bit into the segue of what do I do here at Runway, mostly backend engineer based in the Canary Islands of all places. When you copy paste from Mac to iPhone and vice versa, still feels a bit like it's magical, and it's the Apple ecosystem. It's a bit of a cliche probably, but it's one amazing thing to me.
It is one amazing thing. And another amazing thing is that we have a virtual Adrian here to talk to us.
I'm Adrian. I am living in Mexico. I was born in Mexico, and I'm a software engineer in Runway. My first Apple device was an iPod Classic, actually, because everyone was using the iPods. It was just like a trend. Everyone wanted to hear music anywhere, and iPods were like the cool thing, at least in the circle I was. But then after that, I started like diving deeper into the Apple ecosystem. And then it didn't take so long until I wanted to have a MacBook. At that point, I started to buy even more things like the iPod Touch, and then something happened. So I became one of those people that jailbroke their iPod Touches. I actually made some Cydia Winterboard themes. I think the reason why I became a fanboy is mostly because I think if you really try a bunch of products, they do deliver on the promise of making this like cinematic UI that Steve Jobs used to say all the time. Like it should feel like you are the protagonist of a movie and you're switching things or controlling things like it's a movie. And you can definitely feel that in the iPhone. The first time you scroll with your finger, you definitely felt that. Also, at some point in 2015, I was able to attend a WWDC session. And so by that moment, I was definitely an Apple fan person.
Before we move on, just quickly, I'll say what I do. I am the creative director, brand content. That's where I do stuff, developer experience, events, happy hours at WWDC, stuff like that. I'm also here in Los Angeles, the city that never sleeps, the Windy City, the city by the bay, Los Angeles, California. The Big Apple. That's what we're here talking about right now, the biggest apple of all. So let's get into the WWDC announcements and what you all are most excited about.
And I do think it boils down to like, we appreciate that they have this like beautiful, simplified like software and hardware, and they've tried some amazing things. And they're the kind of company that, like, among all of those, like, FANG companies and, companies with a lot of resources behind them, they're the result of a company that really pays a lot of attention to design. And that means, like, we all know about the compromises. Like, sometimes you can't customize your machine or your software to the nth degree, but you're going to end up with something that is like fundamentally like very usable and very beautiful most of the time. And this year's WWDC, I think, is really interesting in that context where Apple is starting to allow you to do some things that some people kind of find a little bit cheesy and maybe not so beautiful, maybe some weird guardrails. And then, of course, Apple Intelligence is, maybe this really new level to everything Apple does. And they even use the phrase AI for the rest of us. And that is kind of like a microcosm of like both Apple's advantage over the years and the thing people make fun of Apple over the years, which is like they make it easy for your non-expert user to do powerful things, but within their guardrails. Maybe that's their take on AI.
Like Apple is always trying to do this thing of giving something that's intuitive and easy to use and almost magical to the common user. And in that, to accomplish that, Steve Jobs' ideas have always been kind of like, let's tell them how to do it. Like, this is how you should do it. And I think Apple has started deviating from that, and we're gonna talk about it probably. But with this whole thing, and it probably interests you more, Matt, the things that you can do now to your home screen are like, you can make it look really cool, but you can also completely ruin it.
I think it's surprising that the asset for dark icons was not a thing before, because you could specify dark assets in the project for assets that you show actually in the app, dark versus light, because they're not an image or an icon is not gonna adapt automatically to a different color scheme. But yeah, it's interesting. I think another thing I found really interesting, which is more from a user standpoint, is the pivot towards gaming and the way they did it. Because like when they released the game porting toolkit a year ago, they're not only saying we're giving you a tool to port your games to Mac, but also they're saying use it to run Windows games on the Mac, which is something that a couple of years ago I think it would have been unthinkable from Apple. So it's definitely something a bit niche and that affects gamers and not all developers, but I think it also speaks to a shift in Apple's mindset.
I think Apple's plan on the gaming side has been like pretty interesting. Like I think they've had good relationships with some big developers for years, just because obviously mobile gaming is a huge thing, but they're slowly trying to bring along, AAA publishers to figure out when is the right time for them to like spend a lot of money on like a metal native. And then, maybe in a few years we'll have more, processing parity on the Windows and Mac side of the equation, but they're leaning on that now instead of trying to rely on developers to like build up the Mac gaming ecosystem right away, which I think is a super smart way to go about it. To Adrian's question earlier, and I was jumping around a little bit, like I actually thought, like in terms of the customization, like I thought iOS 17's home screen customization was like so well done. Like you could not make your home screen look like super ugly, because they only gave you like a handful of choices. They gave you just a few different places where you could put these widgets, and therefore, for the relative to what you could always do in iOS in the past, you suddenly had like a little bit of ability to do some personal expression on your home screen. And then you would think maybe the next natural evolution of that is this WWDC's announcement of these tinted icons, and it's garish and it's like really horrible looking. And Adrian, it's great that you mentioned the jailbreaking, because I used to be like really into that scene as well. And for every like one like winterboard theme or icon set that I found, like after digging through like 50 of them, that was like 49 of them were tacky as hell, and one of them was really nice. Like Apple now is like, here, it's okay if you make your home screen look like shit, and like that's what the default tinting, even the auto suggested tilting with whatever algorithm they're using, looks horrible.
The dark version of the icons looks great, but when you go with the tint, that straight looks like some Cydia tweak from a year.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of ideas that came out in this WWDC that they just completely ripped off from Cydia tweaks. I mean,
jailbreaking over the years, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. The locking apps that existed, the spacers, it was a weird idea before, but you had like icon spacers, so like empty icons, transparent, so you can have spaces between icons, and now it's the same thing. Put them anywhere. That already existed in the jailbreak community. The customizable control center is also another thing, like where you can put, even in the lock screen, you can now put whatever icon you want, like the lock screen buttons that right now is for flashlight and for the camera. Before, with a Cydia tweak, you could change that years ago.
We've seen widgets on Mac OS for the last, I think, maybe couple of years, where a widget that has its own full set of assets in full color or whatever, as soon as they're in the background, take on the color of the wallpaper. And they actually, like, none of those look bad. Those look really, really good, actually.
Yeah.
And so Apple knows how to do exactly what this feature is properly. I just think in this version of iOS 18, it just hasn't been tuned properly yet. My bet is before like the last beta, like this comes out to the public, they are going to tune the tinting a little bit so it looks a lot nicer. That's my prediction, but I don't know if that's going to be right.
But also just to give a little bit of love to tinted icons, maybe there's a accessibility use case there. Maybe for some color blindness, forms of color blindness, maybe having tinted icons improves things, contrast or something like that.
I was just going to add, it made me think a little bit of when I see my mom's phone, which is an Android phone. And every time her phone's very powerful, great camera on it. There's a lot of really good things about her phone, much like, of course, the iPhone has a great camera. I'm not claiming that her Android phone has a better camera, and the Apple fan person reaction to WWDC from Runway. But every time I look at her phone, I'm like, you look at this all day? Like I see like these messages with like a notepad background. I'm like, what is happening in here? This is awful. And then of course I realized my mom doesn't look at her phone all day like I do. So that's probably helpful in terms of the kind of worst design she sees there. So we could there's a million things to react to, and we could probably talk about it for the rest of the afternoon, just based on how much time we just spent talking about
talking about icons.
talking about icons. So instead of diving more into that stuff, let's really focus on what you've seen that will impact mobile developers.
I have the one that I think it's definitely the biggest one. It will impact every single developer. It doesn't matter what kind of APIs you implement or not. And it's something that I have experienced myself in outside of Xcode because we had it first. And it's this predictive code completion and Swift Assist, which is basically GitHub Copilot for Xcode. Now it can actually complete full lines of code, and even inside the brackets, it can give you a full implementation of a function by just like describing it with code, or even like based from the title of the function, it can give you a suggested implementation. And I can tell you, I have started using GitHub Copilot even when it was in beta, like 2 years ago, in 2021. And it was definitely like a 0 to 1 for me. And right now, whenever I switch from my VS Code setup to something that doesn't have that predictive code completion, I definitely feel like my brain is expecting something to happen with the code, and it doesn't happen. And I realize, oh yeah, I have to type this manually. Now you just describe what you want and it's there. And this is gonna make iOS developers for sure faster. It's like standing in the shoulders of giants for sure. And on top of that, or well, to assist you with that, the Swift Assist thing is basically this live documentation where you can actually ask things and it would respond with. And the coolest thing about this, that for example, GitHub Copilot doesn't have, is that these models that power both the Swift Assist and predictive code completion are going to be updated by Apple automatically with the latest practices. So it's also a great way to always use the best and greatest practices of whatever you're implementing, because you know that the models are going to suggest only that. And so I think this is for sure the thing that's going to impact mobile devs the most. And I'm sure once you got it in your hands, you are never going to want to go back. This is one of those things that it's before and after, and people are going to feel it.
I don't know if this is like a analogy or not, but it's like there was a world where you could, program before a mouse even existed, right? And once the mouse comes along and you get used to it, you're that much more comfortable with like that version of interfacing with a computer or program or whatever. But then you go back to another computer that doesn't have a mouse again, like what you're doing, it just feels like something's missing now, right? And that's like part of the story of AI in general, I think, where it's, if you're going in expecting it to like one click solve all your problems, like that's looking at it the wrong way. When it's at its most powerful, when you understand its limitations, but it's a tool that gets you to where you want to go faster. good programmers are going to be better at using AI than bad programmers because they'll know exactly how to plug something in more quickly, and they'll know the shortcuts to get to the result they want faster.
We're very lucky that we have jobs that allow us to solve problems that are pretty different each time, but there is also this small or relatively small component of repetition. Where you have like, you write some code and you know what's coming next. You know that you have an if statement with 5 different branches and stuff. And that's, to me, where Copilot or the Apple stuff will
whatever they're calling it.
whatever they call it, will shine the most, where they remove the extra heavy load of the repetition, that burden that is one of the things that drains you the most energy from your day-to-day work, and makes it even more interesting and even more enjoyable. So that's also a quality of life improvement.
Good AI should be taking care of the chore part of the job and allowing you to enter into the creative part of the job, right? Yeah. And I think for good reason that's part of the Ale, I know you've had strong opinions on this, but like this is part of why we've been so disappointed with AI so far, is because we've been using it to replace creative tasks. And like that's not what it should be used for. It should be like humans should still be in charge of that part.
I think this approach of trying to use AI to remove just the parts that are really boring or repetitious, or that you don't really care, to just leave space for what you actually want to do, which is this speaks so much to, I think, mobile developers. They always telling them, so you can focus on the important stuff, or the thing that you want to do, solve the puzzle, solve the challenge that you're doing, do the creative stuff. I think that's why Apple and Xcode desperately needed this.
I think to previous point, I think Ali was kind of talking about this. Like, I think what's really interesting is we are. I include myself in your generation, even though I'm like way older than you guys. But that's fine. We'll just do it for now. Like, I think we're of an age where we clearly have experienced most of our lives without AI, right? And we're going to experience the start of life with AI. And Ale expressed, like, I think very understandable like reservations with like putting something out there in the world that's supposed to represent Ale and his feelings and his thoughts that is 100% generated by AI, right? Like, I think we're all a little bit uncomfortable with that. Are there going to be people growing up soon that are way more comfortable with having AI do like way more of everything? And like, how is that going to affect programming and art and communication and things like that in general?
We're going to be the ones, or younger generation, that no, we cannot. We prefer to do it manually. We don't want the AI to handle it for us.
Well, there's a Gen Z movement that wants flip phones, right? So
yeah, I hear about this, and that makes me very happy, actually.
Yeah, it makes me very happy too. One thing that I saw that Apple's now you can get suggested to you different ways to write something. Say if you're responding to an email, like here are some different things you could write based on what you've written here that would improve it. And as a writer, all I want that to say to me is, "This is perfect. I have learned from you for suggesting to other people how they should write." But anyway, so coming back around to the mobile side of things, is there anything that you see as potentially a challenge for mobile developers from any of these announcements? Is there something that might be difficult to implement, or that people may need to spend a little bit more time with to actually start putting it to use in their own apps?
I think that's a recurring theme with Apple, actually, because they tend to announce new technologies, new versions of frameworks and languages. And then there's always the asterisk, which is available only with the latest iOS version, right? So I think it's a challenge that mobile developers have each year, that you have this shiny new toy, this new SwiftUI view, or whatever that may be, and no, you're not ready yet because you have to support a couple of iOS versions prior to the next one, and so you cannot use it yet. And it's a reason why I'm actually pretty excited. Also talking about another good thing that will have a positive impact on mobile developers is about Swift testing. They announced this new framework that is very declarative, reminds a lot of BDD and stuff like that. That it will make writing tests much quicker and easier. And also, since it's a testing framework, you probably won't have to wait for. It doesn't require specifically to support older iOS versions, but the challenge of having the shiny new toy and not being able to use it yet is always a little bit of a leaves always a little bit of an aftertaste, a bitter aftertaste in iOS developers' mouths. I think I've experienced that.
I know that with all this Apple Intelligence thing, there is this new set of APIs for you to like have your app work better with what Apple Intelligence can do. And to be honest, I don't know how much of a challenge this is going to be to developers. I think the biggest challenge here, I think before developers even implement this, I think there is the question whether Apple Intelligence, or well, this new Siri that implements Apple Intelligence is actually going to be worth it for developers to implement. We don't know right now. I think there's this big question of, will these new large language models make you want to use Siri? Because right now I really don't want to use it. And there's already like a bunch of APIs for Siri that I don't know how many applications actually implement. Because what was the last time that you actually asked for Siri to do something in another app?
There's been like powerful Siri shortcuts and APIs to use that, but like a lot of people have held off because people generally, I think, don't like Siri and can't trust it very much. It's like I think we all know that AI is inevitably going to be the future of a lot of things, and it's going to get more and more powerful basically every week. But it almost makes me think of like let's rewind a few years, and if I ask you as like a iOS developer, like, are you going to do something with Force Touch? Like you might have been like, I don't know, I'm going to wait and see if like how good it is and whether people use it. And if you didn't end up using anything with Force Touch at all, you ended up being correct. You're deciding what are you going to spend your time on versus like it's an opportunity cost. Am I going to really jump into making Apple Intelligence better before I really know how powerful and good it's going to be out of the gate? Am I going to miss out if I don't do that versus something I already had on my roadmap? Let me spend my time there and then wait to see how good AI is on device. Or I just used AI to refer to Apple Intelligence. They got me. They got me with their marketing thing. Damn it.
AI is not exactly new, but up until now, it hasn't really improved. And I'm sure they put a lot of effort into that. And there's a parallel there where there's another product that was a disaster at launch, Apple Maps, and it has improved dramatically over the years. So it's not only a question of how much effort Apple or any other company is going to put into improving a product, but also is it actually possible to improve it? So far, Apple Maps has gone a long way, and Siri hasn't. And so we need to see actually in real world, every day-to-day usage, how good is Siri going to be?
Like Apple Maps is a really interesting example because I believe that it is like a fantastic product now versus where it started and versus where all the problems happened. But it is still as a huge like public perception problem. A lot of people, because of what happened, do not trust Apple Maps, haven't opened it on their phone in years. And I think I noted when we were watching WWDC live that it was interesting that Apple did not put a like specific name on what you see in iOS or what you see in Mac OS. Like it's not going to say Apple Intelligence every time the feature pops up, right? They're calling the overall initiative that. But look at Google; they're happy to slap a Gemini label on it. Look at Microsoft; they're happy they're very marketing forward with the name Copilot. There's a button for Copilot on your keyboard now on the Windows side. My initial impression was like that's their way of, I mean, the branding is cool, but they're also a little bit training people to say like, okay, if I get the Copilot version of this, or if I get the Gemini version of this, it might be good, it might not be. I don't really know, right? And I interpreted Apple not giving it some special marketing name as like, oh, we're actually going to blend this into our systems a little bit more seamlessly, so you don't have to like make the choice between like regular usage in Gemini or regular usage in Copilot. I don't think anybody knows, but Apple's differentiation here is the on-device side of things, the privacy side of things, and I think it's going to be up to each developer, each product to, do I dip my toe in now because I know that my customers' data in my app is going to be something that's going to make, Apple Intelligence everywhere that they encounter it more powerful.
That makes me wonder if it was a wise decision to keep Siri around, or maybe they should have tried to wipe the slate clean and get a fresh start.
That's really interesting.
Totally different.
Yeah. In our thread that we had going, reacting to WWDC announcements, I had made the joke that when they came on stage, or on the recorded stage, and said, it's been Siri's now 12 years old, I added the line, and we're excited to announce our first updates to Siri.
Yeah.
Because Siri has certainly fallen behind where we would have expected it to be by now. But yeah, so let's we've talked quite a lot now. So let's start to wrap things up in a few sentences each. What are you most excited about out of WWDC, and what are you least excited about?
I think I said this pretty point blank in the beginning. I think Apple's interpretation of AI, for all the reasons we just talked about, and everything that was like our first impressions of, they splashed across the screen, AI for the rest of us. What does that mean? How is that going to play itself out? I think almost every instance we've seen of AI so far has been a company putting out something that was half-baked just because it's so different and cool. And sometimes it results in something interesting and magical and new. Sometimes it results in absolute crap, which there's like a name for it now, slop, right? We saw that in WWDC itself, where you just, you throw in AI generated images into like an iMessage thread. But on the whole, is Apple Intelligence is Apple's version of machine learning. Now that they've really made it a headline feature, is it going to be better than everybody else's, more user friendly than everybody else's, cutting out more of the unusable crap than everybody else's? Because that's what you expect from Apple. And I don't think they've been shy about creating the impression that they're going to be better at it than everybody. They're going to make it more user friendly than everybody. So I don't doubt their ability. Let me qualify that. I don't doubt that is their goal. I am just skeptical that machine learning is good enough yet, even Apple's version of it, for it to ensure that level of quality that you need to associate with Apple's user interfaces. So that's what I'm looking forward to the most, really, the unknown question and how that plays itself out. And what I'm looking forward to the least is that AI slop. Just like if you guys send me AI generated stuff on iMessage, I'm gonna block you. I just don't want to see it.
For me, I'm gonna be probably it's gonna be a thing that is more narrow. I think in general the improved integration in the ecosystem. So one thing that got me really excited was the continuity iPhone mirroring. I think I'm going to use it a lot. I sit a lot in front of my Mac, or stand in front of my Mac in a standing desk. And it's really useful for me to just have, the notifications of the iPhone coming in, and being able to control the phone and not having to juggle two devices. So for me, the fact that they keep pushing towards this consolidation of the ecosystem, I don't care if they lock me in. It's a really nice prison to be locked in. And probably I'm least excited, and it's very, very personal thing about the customization for everything, home screen stuff like that. I don't care about that at all, but it's just for me. And also a little bit thinking about Steve Jobs, and that he would have not liked to see.
The thing I'm most excited about as a user, I think probably, probably like most people, this Apple Intelligence thing, but mostly the Siri that understands context. If we can make Siri more like, well, at some point behave kind of like your personal Jarvis, that would be incredible. The calculator app, I'm not gonna dive deep into it, but like it's amazing. They actually did it in a way that we didn't expect this, but I tried it and it works. Like we have gotten used to this awkwardness of how a calculator works. And now that if you can do it on paper, it stops being awkward, at least in my opinion. Also, Severance season 2 is something that I really want to see. But now, least exciting things as a user, yeah, probably I think you were mentioning this, Matt, but AI generated stuff that is creepy, like all these images. And as a developer, I just have to say that I hate that Vision OS 2.0 wasn't like a really big update. It was like it was like a minor update. Also, in terms of APIs, they didn't add too much. And well, I do care about it.
If they had called it Vision OS 1.5 or something, would that have made you happier?
Yeah, I think that would be a better naming for sure. Like they added 3 new API stuff and some features that are really cool, but I don't think they deserve like the 2.0 versioning. Just I gotta say, the 2D images to 3D conversion thing, it's incredible. It's incredible.
So let's close it out. I'll close it out first by talking about the thing I'm most excited about. Maybe 2 things. I'm excited about phone mirroring because it will be nice to be able to take actions from my computer. I'm also excited about the calculator app. When I just happened to not be in the room looking when the calculator app came on, and I heard all this cheering for the calculator app, and it's like, yep, that's an Apple event, all right. And then the thing I'm least excited about, I think we've already heard, is the image generation and image swapping. Apple showed with and sounded very excited about it in their presentation, where they showed a beautiful sketch on screen from a notepad, and then they're like, now look at this. And they turn it into the ugliest picture I've ever seen in my life. I'm like, just put it back, put the sketch back, please. In closing, if you've made it this far listening to this whole thing, and then you probably are a pretty big fan of Apple. So one thing I will suggest is that you go to Steve Jobs' favorite restaurant in San Francisco, Cafe Jacoulin. It is a French restaurant that only makes souffles, done by one chef who is now 86 years old. She is in that kitchen every night making souffles. You have to plan to go for 3 hours because she is the only person making souffle. She has a sous chef helping her. That is my final statement for today's live stream. So anyway, thank you all for listening. Thank you, Matt, Ale, and Adrian for being here, as well as virtual Adrian. And now we will end the live stream